United we play, united we win.
Deep right field, another absolute bomb over the flat court.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Klaff. Annie, I'm not one to toot my own horn. I'm really not one to boast about correct predictions that I make. However, we are about a week away removed from last week's NFL draft, and I believe we started last week's show with a quick little segment as to who we thought the Ravens would draft in the first round, and somebody on this podcast said Malachi Starks. Now, granted, Malachi Starks may have been the most popular pick by pretty much any NFL draft pundit around the league. However, I was one of them. Still counts. Bucket for Brendan.
Yeah, I'd like to lump myself into that decision as well, because even though I went with Donovan Ezeraku, I would have also picked Malachi Starks if you did not go first, which is why I wanted you to go first, that I could add a different kind of juice in there and bring some other names into the option.
Well, I went first, and I said Malachi Starks.
So you get the credit.
I absolutely do,
I'm with you.
I will hold that over your head for a while.
That's okay.
Probably. Outside of our correct NFL draft takes, we were hoping to come back on this Orioles podcast with some more positive news. However, it has been another kind of tough week of Orioles baseball with a tough series in Detroit and a difficult game last night. So we've got a lot to talk about today, talking about the Orioles' consistency or lack thereof, where they are hoping to find some energy. It's just kind of lacking on a day-to-day basis. But first, we need to start with some injury updates because there were a heck of a lot of roster moves to go over. So we'll start with kind of the injury updates that don't really change anything, and that's Grayson Rodriguez and Colton Cowser being transferred to the 60-day injured list. They've just been out for a while, and by the time they get through their rehab assignments or whatever it may be to get them back into Major League Baseball shape, they are going to be on the injured list for more than 60 days, so it just makes sense to move them to the 60-day injured list. The benefit of that, if you're wondering, is that if you are just on the 10 or 15-day injured list, 10-day for a position player, 15-day for a pitcher, if you are moved to the 60-day injured list, you don't count against your team's 40-man roster, so you can add players to the 40-man roster with guys on the 60-man and those guys, on the 60-day injured list, and those players do not count towards the 40-man roster. So that's the benefit of moving those two guys, but it doesn't really change their timetable.
Yeah, and it also kind of, you were hoping for some good news. Obviously, with Grayson Rodriguez, hurts a little bit because you knew that he was maybe starting to come over this elbow, tricep, weird injury, and then obviously
elbow, tricep, shoulder, lat. It has been a whole bunch of different things.
And then obviously he gets that lat strain and the whole imaging for this new injury, and that one is definitely another tough blow because even though we don't have the specifics for updates, and like you mentioned, it doesn't really mean anything with that kind of injured list transfer, it definitely hurts knowing that it is not only the first injury and we don't really have any updates on that or if it has subsided at all, but it is now a second one, and he's had experience before with lat strains in the past.
Yeah, and he was trying to do some different things mechanically this offseason to avoid some similar lat injuries, but kind of sounds like maybe during the course of his rehab, your mechanics get a little bit funky if you are favoring an injured part of your arm or shoulder or whatever it may be. So who knows exactly how this developed, but yeah, even though it doesn't really change the timetable, it is still a bummer to hear that Grayson Rodriguez is on a 60-day injured list, given that this is an injury that has kind of been updated and changed a lot throughout. Colton Cowser, you just knew was going to be out for a few months because he broke a bone, right? But with Grayson Rodriguez, it's this and that and another thing. So those two guys on the 60-day IL. And then a couple of guys to the 10-day injured list. The first one was Tyler O'Neill, who hits the 10-day injured list with a neck injury. He was out for a few days with neck soreness, tightness initially. I think he missed 2 games, and then he was back in the lineup, and then it just seemed like it came back, and it flared up a little bit. So the Orioles erring on the side of caution there, put him on the 10-day injured list so that that doesn't get worse. Gary Sanchez on the 10-day injured list as well with a wrist injury. Sanchez had said that he was fighting through it for a little bit, but it was impacting him at the plate. Gary Sanchez had kind of had a tough go of it offensively, so that wrist injury could be a little bit of an explanation there. And then Jordan Westburg to the 10-day injured list with a hamstring injury. He's been all over the place injury-wise. I mean, Brandon Hyde said in that Toronto series where, Jordan Westburg was on fire for the first 3 days, gets benched in the 4th game, and a lot of fans didn't know why. Brandon Hyde gets a lot of heat for it, and Hyde basically said, he could barely walk into the locker room on that 4th day, and Jordan Westburg is just a tough dude. And you would have to imagine that you could see him visibly shaken up, too. There was a game in D.C. where he slides into home plate, gets up pretty gingerly, and we asked Brandon Hyde about it after the game. And the response is basically, he's Jordan Westburg. He's fine. So Jordan Westburg finally hits the injured list with what seems like a litany of injuries. This is a hamstring injury. Brandon Hyde had said earlier in the year that he had some upper body stuff going on. So kind of sounded like a little bit of everything for him.
Yeah, and with Westburg, you can tell he wasn't himself from the very jump of the season and even at the end of spring training, too, because this is a guy that last year was pivotal to bringing in runners in scoring position, and this season, his numbers are not that. It's a batting average of 188 with runners in scoring position for Jordan Westburg. So you clearly know that Westburg is not at his full peak potential as he would be if he was fully healthy, especially when it comes to also he's probably had more appearances right now as designated hitter than in the infield and playing defense. I would need to fact check that.
Yeah,
but
he was the DH a lot.
Yeah. So that just goes to show that there really was something that's been bogging down Westburg, whether that's this hamstring issue, which is apparently retroactive to the 27th against the Tigers, or if it's anything before that, like you mentioned, the upper body stuff, just being worn down from spring training, a whole boatload of issues.
Yeah, it is retroactive to the 27th, as you mentioned, but the injuries are retroactive to a while ago, since that Toronto series to begin the season. So Jordan Westburg, it finally just caught up to him. It sounds like he is a tough dude and clearly did not want to go on the injured list, but things just continued to pile up. So those 3 guys on the 10-day IL, it seems like they should be short-ish stints from what we have heard so far. But in the meantime, the Orioles call up Emmanuel Rivera, Dylan Carlson, and Maverick Hanley, who made his major league debut yesterday, which was kind of the lone bright spot in that game. Maverick Hanley and Charlie Morton.
And Gunnar Henderson's 1 home run.
And Gunnar Henderson's angry home run.
Right. But, I mean, even going back to Tyler O'Neill, too, you hope that it's a short stay, just given his history of injured list history just over the years and in his career. I know that when the O's acquired him in the offseason, you and I had said that if this guy is healthy and stays healthy, then this is a great steal. But so far, it hasn't been that way. I mean, he hasn't. And he'll be the first person to admit that he hasn't been doing his job of mashing left-handed pitchers, which is what he was brought in to do. But you really hope that that's a short stay. He, even though has had so much injury history in the past, most of them have been short stays as well. There's just been a lot of really weird, funky things.
Yeah, and you kind of anticipated this from Tyler O'Neill. This is why you bring in somebody like Dylan Carlson, who doesn't necessarily make the roster out of camp, but Colton Cowser, of course, an unexpected injury. Tyler O'Neill, you hate to say expected injury, but given his injury history, it would have been foolish to go through the offseason and not have some contingency plans there. So, Dylan Carlson has a lot of big league experience. He is a suitable replacement there. Emmanuel Rivera comes up. I would imagine the thinking there of him versus Kobe Mayo, who has better numbers than Rivera does in AAA Norfolk right now, is this is probably a short stay for Jordan Westburg. And if Emmanuel Rivera isn't going to get much playing time and Jordan Westburg is going to be back after the minimum 10 days, then, Kobe Mayo is not going to get a lot of opportunities in the big leagues in that instance. So if you had that question, that may be an explanation as to why. But as I mentioned, kind of the big, broad topic we're going to try to hit on today is the consistency of this team, and you see it day to day, right? And I think the first two games against the Yankees is kind of it's a pretty perfect example of what this season has felt like, where on Monday you get a good start from Tomoyuki Sugano, and the offense wasn't outstanding, but the offense had a lot of life.
Yeah.
You saw guys busting down the line. If there was just a ground ball, they were trying to beat out everything in the infield. The energy was there. They brought back the old celebrations. It felt like the old Orioles lineup a little bit, and those are the kinds of games that good teams win, where it's a good starting pitching performance, the bullpen was solid, and the offense, even though it wasn't spectacular, they do enough to win the baseball game. Everything worked together well. All three phases were good. And then yesterday, all three phases were not good. You get off to an incredibly slow start, obviously, with Kyle Gibson allowing 4 home runs in the first inning. And then you see that snowball into the offense pressing, into the energy being down, into uncharacteristic mistakes defensively, where Gunnar Henderson has a couple of errors, Jackson Holliday had an error, because it's hard to lock in games like that when you are down that much that early. So let's kind of start with the positive.
Sure.
The positive so far on the pitching side, because that is really the thing that has been snowballing everything, it feels like. Tomoyuki Sugano and Cade Povich. Sugano has had 3 straight really good starts. Cade Povich, I know, had the 7 earned runs start before, but outside of that, it has been 3 earned runs or fewer for him to start the season.
Yeah, Sugano has delivered an ace-like outing for at least the last few, especially on Monday. He got whiffs on 9 of his 12 splitters. His splitter was insane on Monday. 17 swings and misses total that night, 9 strikeouts, and 6 of them were splitters. And one of them specifically to note for his strikeouts was when Aaron Judge chased one of the splitters specifically on a 2-2 count. So it was just an overall great and big night for Sugano. And like you mentioned, it is pretty night and day when you go from having a really good start and having an okay or bad start, and then how the offense responds to it as well. Because even when you look at the first two games against the Yankees, the first one was Sugano. The O's had 8 hits. Last night, when it was Gibson, there were only 3 hits. So it really is just completely night and day. But Sugano has been the bright spot of this team so far. He ends up with a 3 flat ERA, and the command is in the 87th percentile. So he is just doing exactly what he was brought in to do. The command is elite. He is exactly what the pitching staff needs right now, and the consistency needs to stay, and others need to follow suit a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sugano and Povich have kind of been those guys lately. And when you look at the outcomes, it's not surprising that the Orioles have won 3 out of the 4 starts where those guys have been really good. Sugano has 3 straight outings where he's been excellent. Mm-hmm. The Orioles won 2 of those games. And then Cade Povich, the Orioles win 2-1. Again, the offense isn't great, but the offense does enough. In Washington, he goes 6 2/3, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 5 strikeouts. And you mentioned the strikeout numbers for Sugano on Monday. Brandon Hyde mentioned, too, like it felt like he had a little bit more juice, a little bit more swagger on the mound. Like those strikeouts where he was kind of rearing back for those splitters and putting them in good spots, and he had a little bit more swagger on the mound. And the energy was there. And you saw it at the beginning of the season, too, with Zach Eflin. I mean, the first game of the season with Zach Eflin on the mound in Toronto, the Orioles went nuts offensively. And in those 3 Eflin starts, the Orioles have combined to score 17 runs. Yeah. And they've won 2 of those games. They were shut out in the middle game. But you feel the juice, right? And in a game like yesterday, where Kyle Gibson has a really, really tough first inning and you're down 7 runs, that puts you out of a baseball game really, really early. And it's hard to get that energy back. And I understand that these are professional athletes, and I understand that when they get down early, it is still on them to lock in and try to get something going in that baseball game. They are also human beings, and they're not robots, and it's really hard to lock into a game like that. Yesterday is an extreme example with 4 home runs in the first inning. But the Orioles have been down early a lot. And I'm not breaking any news here. The starting pitching staff would tell you the same thing. They can't keep putting the offense in that kind of hole because, yes, the offensive numbers have not been good. And we have had plenty of discussions about the fact that the offense needs to step up, and guys like Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson and Jordan Westbrook before he went on the injured list, those were the guys you were looking to supplement right now, it feels like, even though it should kind of be the other way around, Cedric Mullins and Ryan O'Hearn and what they are giving you at the plate right now. It's just hard to do that when you are in a hole and you get to the second inning, and more often than not, you're already losing the baseball game.
Yeah.
That's hard. And for human beings that are playing this game, that's difficult to not feel like you are adding pressure to all of your at-bats, to not feel like you have to go out and score just a ton of runs, which has the adverse effect of now you're not scoring any runs because you're pressing.
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head where you said that last night is the perfect example to show that the Orioles offense is completely different when there is a better starter on the mound or consistency in whatever that start is. I mean, the team stats right now is a 188 batting average when trailing behind and a 244 batting average when ahead. And that is just the huge kind of point of stat to look at, where when the Orioles are trailing, they're going to continue trailing more than likely because of the start that has been given to the offense. And it's not like you can easily pick up that energy after you lose 4 home runs in the first inning. That is a very, very hard thing to do. But it's a completely, like I said before, night and day to when you have the mojo right off the jump. So I don't know whether it's you just got to have some kind of solid outing from the beginning so as not to go down 4 home runs. Obviously, it's a lot easier said than done, but just so that you can stay in the game a little bit closer from the very beginning. Yeah, and that's the thing. You don't need 7 innings, 1 earned, 11 strikeouts from these guys. One of the Tomoyuki Sugano starts where he goes 7 innings, which, you don't even need 7 innings, but it was 7 innings, 3 earned runs. Yeah. And even in that game, they got down early, but there's a certain level of confidence that I think these hitters have. Jackson Holliday alluded to it with Tomoyuki Sugano on the mound, where it's, you know what you're getting from him and you know you're going to be in the baseball game. And that means something. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that the offense looks completely different. The Orioles are 11-18 right now. They have scored 38 runs in their 18 losses. That's 2.1 runs scored per loss. And I know this sounds like a silly stat because, of course, they score more runs in wins and they score fewer runs in losses. But 2.1 runs scored per loss. It is not like in games where they are allowing 7 runs that they're scoring 6. They're just not scoring when the pitching staff does not give them a good outing. In the games that they have won, which is 11 games, they have scored 77 runs. So it's 7 runs per game when they win and just over 2 runs per game when they lose. That difference should not be that high. Yeah. But it's because of what the pitching staff has been giving you so far that, it just feels like the energy is completely different in those 2 games. Dean Kramer, I think, has said it before, where it was, when we win games, we look like a really good baseball team. We look like the baseball team that we should be. And when we lose, we don't look good. Right. They don't look good when they lose games. And like you mentioned with the Sugano going 7 innings, 3 earned runs, obviously that's still a quality start, but it can be very similar where if you just get some kind of decent level outing from a starting pitcher that keeps you in the ball game. A prime example is in the Cleveland series. Obviously, you had Sugano's 7-inning start with 3 home runs from the offense. But then the day before that, that's a Kramer start. We're only 5 1/3 innings. Yes, only 1 earned run, which was great. It was the only run allowed of the entire game, but they still scored 3 home runs on the offensive side of things. And those were 2 games that looked like complete holistic wins. They're very, very different starts because you have Sugano going 2 1/3 innings or almost 2 innings deeper than Kramer does. But Kramer still went out there and delivered a really strong, decent outing to keep them in the ball game. And it's like you need from the rest of the rotation to be able to provide more of a chance to win and stay in the game. Like right now, at least with Gibson and when Morton has been giving starts, it has seemed a lot less competitive. And I think that that's the biggest thing where, yes, you can be trailing a little bit from behind or not have a perfect start, but at least stay competitive and stay in the game. Yeah, you've got to be in it. Right. I mean, 8 of the 11 Orioles wins this year have come in games started by Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Sugano, or Cade Povich. You have to be in the baseball game. And one stat that jumped out to me was that
You know, the Orioles have allowed 8 or more runs in 8 of their 29 games this season, which is over 27%. We're talking 8 or more runs.
Yeah.
8 is a lot.
That is not good.
For reference, they allowed 8 or more runs in 22 of their 162 a season ago, which is 13.5%. That's jumped up to 27.5% this season. And again, we are not breaking any news here, but the starting rotation doesn't need to be unbelievable.
Right.
There are injuries to Zach Eflin, to Grayson Rodriguez, to Albert Suarez, to Trevor Rogers, to guys like that could have been either at the top of the rotation in the case of Eflin and Rodriguez, or providing depth in Suarez and Rogers and McDermott, guys that you do not have. However, even giving those injuries, you cannot have the worst ERA in the American League.
Yep.
You're just not going to win baseball games like that.
Yeah.
And you're not going to win baseball games if you are pretty consistently allowing 8 or more runs per game. That's too many. If you are allowing 4 or 5 runs per game, you're going to win close baseball games. But a lot of these games haven't been close. They don't have a ton of one-run wins. They don't have a ton of one-run losses. It's really one way or another. And the good baseball team is still in there because you see it in the wins. They win close games like they did in D.C. and like they just did against New York. They have won some blowout games because the offense just explodes if there is a good starting pitching performance, it seems like. There's got to be a happy medium there where, you'll lose some games that are close if the bullpen has an uncharacteristically bad night, or if a starting pitcher gives you 5 earned runs instead of 3 earned runs. That sort of stuff happens. But what can't happen is consistently is that the other team scores 8 or more runs.
Right.
That's too many runs to keep you in a baseball game.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that it just needs to be closer because I think that is simply put, I know we're going a little bit all over the place, but that is simply put what needs to happen in order for the Orioles to stay in this division race down the stretch. Because the pitching ERA in losses, I know, like you mentioned with the earlier stat where it seems a little bit silly to point out with the in losses versus wins.
Right.
But the pitching ERA in losses is an 8.76, but 2.54 in wins. Like, it's just a really
and again, pitching
difference.
is better when they win, and the pitching is worse
clearly,
when they lose.
But
the splits cannot be that drastic.
And it just needs to be a closer margin, because if you score early, if you hold off runs early, then that's just going to be a completely different ball game than moving on. And it's not like the club doesn't know this. It's not like the players, Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins, Gunnar, Adley, all these leaders, and just every veteran or new guy for that matter in the clubhouse. It's not like they don't know that, because they do. It's just a hard.
Nobody's happy with how they're playing. There's nobody in the clubhouse that is taking moral victories after a big loss, right? Like, nobody's doing that, and nobody in the starting rotation is happy with how they've thrown outside of Tomoyuki Sugano, and I think Cade Povich has had some solid outings too. Brandon Young is still working back, but Charlie Morton's not pumped about how he's been throwing the ball this year. Although I would like to give a shout out to Charlie Morton, who last night comes in on 2 days rest after throwing 80 pitches and saves the Orioles bullpen.
Yeah.
Because the Orioles, last night or not, in that huge blowout win, still have a chance to win this series today against the Yankees. And Charlie Morton, if they do, and if they need some bullpen arms to come in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning, whatever it may be, Charlie Morton saved those guys.
Yeah.
And say what you will about how Morton has pitched this year for the Orioles. Obviously, it is not what he wanted. It is not what Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias wanted from Charlie Morton to start the year. But that is a veteran pro move for a guy who has been a starter for his entire career to be that much of a team guy, to come out of the bullpen 2 days after throwing 80 pitches and eat up some innings in a blowout loss. That says a lot about Charlie Morton.
Especially when he's getting booed when he walks onto the field. I also am just not in support of that. But he's getting booed as he walks on, and then comes into this game where obviously the Orioles are losing. But then he puts up 2 1/3 innings with 0 earned runs, 3 hits, only 1 walk, which is great for Charlie Morton comparatively, and 2 strikeouts. You compare that 2 1/3 innings to his 2 1/3 innings against Cincinnati with 7 hits and 7 earned runs. Drastic change, and that's exactly what you want from a guy out of Charlie Morton, just to kind of shift the narrative and change the script a little bit, which is exactly what he's doing, and you hope it continues for him.
Yeah, and again, on 2 days rest for somebody who is not used to coming out of the bullpen, Charlie Morton has gotten his fair share of criticism this year, and a lot of it has been justified given the ERA that he has had to start the season. And we have always tried to be fair in how we talk about him because, yes, it has been a very tough start to the season, but he deserves a lot of praise for what he did yesterday. That really saved them, and we could see it today. All right, Annie, so we've talked about the issues here of the energy, the pitching not putting them in a good spot, the offense not really being there. How do you fix it is the answer. Or it is the question that we are trying to find answers for, excuse me. There's not good answers, but we'll try to provide some here. The first one is just that you have to find a way to manufacture the juice, right? If the starting pitching is not where you want it to be, the juice can't be automatically gone. I understand a game like yesterday is a little bit of an exception where it's 7 earned in the first inning, and that's a ridiculous hole to try to expect a team to climb out of. But if it's 3 earned in a first inning, right, like we saw from Tomoyuki Sugano in his start last week against the Nationals, you got to be able to find a way to come out of a hole like that. Jacob Calvin-Meyer reported that the Orioles had a players-only meeting with the hitters on Monday before the game. By the way, don't jump on Brandon Hyde for that. Sometimes you just need to talk to the boys. Like, there are just some things that, yes, the managers and the coaches have meetings with the players every day. Sometimes you just need to have a players-only thing. Right. And that is not an indictment of Brandon Hyde. Sometimes that's just what needs to happen.
All around the world, all kinds of levels of sports.
Like, you wouldn't talk to your parents about everything if you needed to talk to your brother about something. It's
pretty sure that happened in rec league soccer with me, so I think that
probably
it's not so anything on my dad as the coach.
If you are criticizing Brandon Hyde for that, you're just finding things to try to criticize Brandon Hyde for because you have other frustrations. So something like that clearly had an impact on Monday where we saw a little bit more energy. We saw some more juice. They went back to the old celebrations. It felt like the old offense a little bit. It was a tough, gritty, grinded out win. They only put 4 runs on the board, but that was enough to win the baseball game. You need the leaders to step up and continue to do things like that where, Cedric Mullins called out the energy and he called out kind of what he was seeing on a day-to-day basis. You need those guys to continue to do things like that, where even if it's nothing really on the field stats and performance-wise, you can be in charge of the energy that you are bringing in and day out. And if the leaders are going to continue to do things like that, whether it's players-only meeting all the time or whatever it may be, you got to do stuff like that.
Right, and when it comes to manufacturing the energy, so to speak, and honing in on the kind of mojo that needs to be held and maintained through all types of games, whether you're down early, whether you're up early, you name it. But I think the next topic of conversation also is being able to solve the issue of runners in scoring position, because this was clearly an issue late last season when the offense was slumping and going into the postseason. It's clearly still an issue today. Yes, you had a prime example for this as well was Ryan O'Hearn's 3-run home run when Sugano started on Monday. Yes, that the mojo is completely different than when they were behind because you had a great start from Sugano and you had an explosive hit from Ryan O'Hearn that got the game going. So yes, you had the offense and the pitching working on both in a parallel fashion.
Right.
But it was still 1 of 7 with runners in scoring position on Monday. Yes, all you needed was 1, but you still need to have more of that to be able to sustain throughout 162 and beyond.
Yeah, you need to take advantage of the opportunities when they're there. It is something that the Orioles struggled with at the second half of last season, where they were missing somebody like Jordan Westberg and they weren't hitting well with runners in scoring position. They need to start doing that.
Right.
The offense has been struggling, and yes, there is an energy factor that comes with not getting great performances from your starting pitching, and that makes it hard for the offense to really get going. But you still need to get going. You still need to figure out a way to do it. And when you have a good starting pitching performance, you can't waste it at this point. You need to hit with runners in scoring position. You need to take advantage of the fact that that game is close, that you have a really good bullpen that has been keeping you in every close game late down the stretch, and you need to hit with runners in scoring position. You're absolutely right. For whatever conversation you can have about the energy and the juice, you need to come up in those sorts of big moments.
Right, and it's also not even the big moments, too. They're only 196 batting average in low-leverage situations. That's most of the game.
Yeah.
And Brandon Hyde even said with Ryan Mountcastle yesterday where he's just not himself. He's putting way too much pressure on himself, maybe even putting way too much pressure on himself to make it to the new left field wall, but he's just not hitting the way that he is. He is chasing fewer than he was, or less than he was last season, but he's just not where he should be right now, and the potential that, and I think that that's a lot of the guys in the club right now, where even in low leverage situations, they're just maybe putting on too much pressure because they're down because of the pitching. It's just a whole, it's very much of a domino effect. And I think that when the pitching stays consistent, then you can have runs early on, runners in scoring position, make it home. It just all needs to be a well-oiled machine, because we've seen too many times where there's rough pitching, then it leads to rough defense. For example, yesterday, Gunnar Henderson's fielding error shouldn't have been a fielding error.
Right.
But that's because of the domino effect that was yesterday.
Yeah, it's a three-phase game. I think we hear about it a lot in a sport like football, where it's, offense, defense, special teams. You need all three phases to play well, or else you're not going to win a football game. Baseball isn't often thought of the same way, but those three phases really bleed into each other. If you're struggling at the plate, it's hard to lock in defensively. Yeah. If the pitching staff does not get you off to a good start, it's hard to get going offensively. And if it's hard to get going offensively, it's hard to get going defensively. And I think yesterday was a great example of that. I think there also was a good example of Gunnar Henderson clearly just being angry and hitting a really, really far home run. I wouldn't mind seeing them play a little angrier.
Yeah, me either.
Gunnar Henderson took a mean swing yesterday. I mean, it was a ball inside off the plate and just turned on it and launched it onto the flag court. Play a little angry if you have to. Like, there are some athletes that need to flush it and just not have it on their brain and, come into each new day with a different mentality and you're good to go. And there's some guys that just play better angry. Like, I didn't play close to this level of sports, obviously, but when I was playing sports in high school, I was one of those guys. I just played better angry. If there was something in the game that happened and I just, boom, there I went. I would like to see some of those guys play a little bit angrier. I think that's something that, whatever energy they need to bring, if it's that energy, bring whatever energy you need
Any kind of energy in life.
Yeah, so that's the consistency on the offensive end. The consistency from the pitching side of things is a harder conversation, and it's one that the Orioles have been trying to find all season. Obviously, Zach Eflin has it and had it, and you are just counting down the days until he is back in the starting rotation, because that is going to be a huge, huge boost. Shout out Tomoyuki Sugano, because he keeps doing it every fifth day. He's bringing the consistency. He has been excellent. It's not huge strikeout numbers outside of that game on Monday, where he was awesome against the Yankees. Before that, it was 2 straight starts of 7 innings. And, it wasn't dominant stuff, but it's a lot of weak contact. He's not walking guys. He's doing exactly what you need. Cade Povich has been really solid outside of one blow-up start. Dean Kramer's a slow starter. He's got a career 6.24 ERA in March and April. Yep. So while this is a tough start and it comes in conjunction with a lot of other guys having tough starts, you're anticipating and hoping that once it hits May, his ERA is going to drop by over 2 runs as it has in his career. So you're hoping that happens. Those are the 3 guys that are going to be in the rotation. Brandon Young was better in start 2, but that's still a rookie. How much can you really rely on him? Zach Eflin, as I mentioned, hopefully on his way back soon. He will obviously be in the rotation when he comes back. Then you got Kyle Gibson, who I'm sure the Orioles are going to give more than one start to. It was obviously a really rough start yesterday, but it was his first start in the big leagues, and he didn't have a spring training. He's trying to ramp up. I don't know. I think there's different things you can chalk it up to. It was his first start. He's playing the Yankees.
Yeah.
You got to hope he's going to settle in.
Right, and obviously it's hard to overcome and look past the 22 ERA to start the season from Gibson. But like you mentioned, you do have to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt where, yes, it is his first big league start since September 26th. He's coming off of 3 appearances in the minors, so a little bit of a shortened kind of spring training simulation, whatever you name it, for Gibson. And it is very hard to make your first start with a new club, so to speak. Obviously, it's not new to him, but new in the last year or so, against a Yankees offense that is just lighting up the way that it is right now. So yes, the pressure for starting pitching right now was extremely heightened for Kyle Gibson to come in and provide some consistency. So you can chalk it up a little bit to that to say why maybe Gibson was not the kind of pitcher that you were hoping for. But still, he's got to also provide some consistency moving forward and not do that. He was also the first person to say in his media scrum afterwards last night that that's never happened before in his entire career. He knows that's not who he is. He knows that's not what this ball club needs right now. So that's just hopefully just a one-off thing, because it really has to be a one-off thing.
It's got to be for this starting rotation at this point. And I don't anticipate that Kyle Gibson is going to continue to give you starts like that moving forward. Charlie Morton, it seems like he may have found a home in the bullpen as somebody who was just going to give you innings and give you length. He was solid yesterday. As we mentioned, that was a really nice outing from him to be able to give the bullpen some life today. But, some general just takeaways of what do you do? The starting pitching needs to be better. We're not... that's not groundbreaking news here. The starting pitching just flat out needs to be better. Every single starting pitcher in the rotation would tell you that.
Yep.
Zach Eflin coming back is going to help. We don't know what the timetable of Grayson Rodriguez is. You've got to work with what you've got at this point, and hopefully Kyle Gibson will turn things around, and Zach Eflin coming back to this rotation will be a big boost. You've got to find some juice on the offensive side of things. It can't just be in really good starts from the starting pitcher. It's got to be in the mediocre ones too, because even a good starting pitching staff is going to have so-so starts every once in a while. You need to limit the absolute blow-up starts that we have seen from the Orioles thus far. But even if it is a 5-inning, 4 earned run performance from a starting pitcher, you're in that baseball game because the bullpen is really good and they can keep it to a 4, 5, 6 run performance for the other side there, and the offense needs to find a way to be in that game too. So even if the start is meh, the juice has to be there as well. It's a young team learning how to work through things, and they've obviously got to do it sooner rather than later, because this has been a few weeks now where we're talking about this slow start, and it's too talented of a team to continue to do this.
Yeah, and you also need to make sure that there is also continued consistency from Tomo and Cade, because obviously both of which are still fairly new to the big leagues.
Yeah.
Cade Povich still only in his second year. I mean, yes, he's doing fantastically right now, but he's got to stay in it, got to stay locked in. Same with Sugano. I think it's funny when we look back to where we were going into the season when we were kind of providing our hot takes, storylines for 2025. Our very first one was Sugano is the 3rd best pitcher in the starting rotation. Obviously, that was when Zach Eflin and Grayson Rodriguez were still healthy. So if you factored that into the equation, he probably, if they were still healthy, he would be the number 3. Right now, it's looking like he's pretty much the number 1 ace caliber type of pitcher in this rotation. But he has got to continue that ace type outing for moving forward, because it's exactly what the O's need. He has been providing exactly what they've needed. And then you mentioned Dean Kramer's rough Aprils and Marches in previous.
Yeah.
You would rather him progress throughout the season than the other way around, which is good because his career ERAs do get better by the month. April 6.24, May 4.10, and August 3.29 ERA. So you've got to get him to lock in earlier somehow than how it has been in the past. The jump from May to August is huge. He's got to bring it in earlier.
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily for this year, April is done, right? So
True.
At this point, you're just hoping that Dean Kramer is going to lock it in May as he has in the past, because if you can have a third guy in the rotation that has given you pretty solid, consistent starts, and then Zach Eflin comes back, and all of a sudden that's 4, and Kyle Gibson starts to get
Works it out.
into the fold, and all of a sudden that's 5, you feel a heck of a lot better.
Yeah.
So you need those guys to work in a little bit, and I think there are still going to be tweaks in this lineup, right? You're missing key pieces with Jordan Westberg and Tyler O'Neill in the lineup that are going to be in there close to every day. So I'm interested to see how Brandon Hyde manages things. I would love to see Ryan O'Hearn continue to get some at-bats, even if it is against the lefty. I mean, Ryan O'Hearn is just mashing right now.
Right.
I do have to comment on one comment we're getting on Facebook. Chris says, Henderson is not a shortstop. Bounce him to third. Holiday at shortstop. Westy at second. All of that's wrong. Gunnar Henderson is a really good shortstop. He has had some uncharacteristic errors this year. He has a lot better arm strength than Jackson Holiday, who is a more natural second baseman. Jordan Westberg is a better third baseman than he is a second baseman by every single defensive metric. I'm sorry. I just had to get that off my chest. That comment was bothering me because, yes, you need to make changes. Yes, this team needs to get better. You're not going to do ridiculous things like moving Gunnar Henderson's primary position when he was a top 5 MVP finisher last year. You're not going to move Jordan Westberg when his defensive metrics are better at third than they are at second, and Jackson Holiday is a good second baseman. Sorry.
Pop-off king.
Yes, there are changes that need to be made. Everybody in the clubhouse would tell you that. You're not going to do insanely drastic things that don't make sense. You can make big moves and big changes. The Orioles are clearly not afraid to do that. They didn't like what they were getting from Charlie Morton in the rotation to start the year. He seems like he is in the bullpen now, if yesterday is an indication of his role moving forward. Yes, you need to make tweaks. Yes, you need to make changes because nobody is happy with the start to the season that the Orioles have had. A suggestion like moving Gunnar Henderson off of shortstop is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You don't need to make those kinds of changes. Yes, make tweaks in the lineup. Yes, try to get guys back and healthy and get back into the swing of things. Yes, the starting rotation needs to be better. Yes, the offense needs to be better. Manage the changes. Don't make drastic, huge things that don't make sense. You can do big changes that don't make sense. That one doesn't make sense. Sorry, that comment bothered me.
Yeah, I will echo everything that Brendan just said.
I mentioned that I was a better athlete in high school when I played Angry. Maybe I'm a better podcaster when I podcast Angry.
Maybe. Just a three-minute monologue from Brendan to close out the pod.
Anyway.
You hit everything that needed to be said, though, because I think that so many people think that, yes, Gunnar gave up one error last night. He's given up a few errors this season. You don't move Gunnar Henderson.
No,
everyone around the league would say the same thing.
You need to find sparks. You need to find changes that make sense. Keep them within the realm of reality. And if you're a fan and you are wanting things to change and happen, yes, there are lineup changes. Yes, there are starting rotation changes. But let's keep it in here. This is still a talented team. They have the ability to turn things around once the starting rotation gets healthier and hopefully finds a bit of a groove. This offense is too good to keep playing like this. I still have confidence that they are going to figure it out. They need to do it soon, right? Because now the calendar is slipping to May, but I know it's easy to try to do drastic things, but they've got to make sense. So there's my rant to end this podcast. Hopefully next week again.
It was a good one. You guys got a good one this time.
I know we say it feels like for the last 3 weeks we have said, let's come back on a more positive note next week. We are hoping for that. Everybody in the clubhouse is hoping for that as well. The Orioles still with a chance to win this series. I know it doesn't feel like that after the loss yesterday, but the Orioles can still win a series at home against the division-leading Yankees. That would go a long way for this team's confidence. So I think it's a huge, huge game today, and it's going to be another big series this weekend. Let's get some momentum going and get things going in the right direction because it has snowballed in the wrong way and it absolutely can snowball in the right way. But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of the Bird's Nest. Thank you for commenting along. Even if I yell at some of your comments, I apologize for that. But we are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on YouTube and Facebook, or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or your digital shows. You can find us here on the Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Klaff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.